Jim, there are about 3.5 million teenagers in high schools out there across the country, and they're our front line in the battle against man-made climate change. I wonder if you'd take a moment and give them a goal and a challenge.
Yeah, well, of course, it's because of those students and my own grandchildren that I decided to write this book, because this story is not so simple. We need to make people understand what is really needed. And if you look at it in terms of the fossil fuels, the story becomes quite clear. The amount of oil and gas is limited, and it's going to be burned because the big pools are owned by countries like Russia and Saudi Arabia. They're not going to leave that in the ground. But if you look at the scale of the problem, the real issue is the coal and the unconventional fossil fuels. We have to leave those in the ground. And then in turn, that implies something about policy, namely we're going to have to put a price on carbon emissions. Well, so this story is not so simple as like opposing the Vietnam War, when you had a very simple objective and people would go out and protest. Here, they've got to understand a bit about the story and the way that governments are greenwashing it and not really doing their job, but pretending they're doing their job. It's a challenge. Students are going to have to, to understand this and to begin to affect the political process by saying, we're not going to let you get away with greenwash. You've got to actually take the actions that are needed.
I'm Zena Sabbath from St. Agnes Academy in Houston. Professor Hansen, what will it take to get worldwide cooperation on these environmental issues? Hopefully it won't have to be another disaster like an environmental 9/11, but what will it take?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because the public doesn't tend to react, and the political system doesn't tend to react until the problem has become very obvious to everybody. Unfortunately, in this case, we can't really afford to wait for a global disaster because of the nature of the climate system, the fact that it responds slowly. So it has not responded fully to the gases that we've already put in the atmosphere. So we really have to get people to understand, and the political system to understand, that we have to begin to take actions now without waiting for great disasters. So that makes this a very hard problem. And I wish I had a great answer for how we could push the system faster, but I think the best answer is to get people to understand the system and to see what is happening, because there are things happening all around the world. In the Arctic, the glaciers melting on all mountains around the world, the subtropics expanding, so the southwest United States and Mediterranean region, Australia, are having hotter, drier climate and more fires. The coral reefs are obviously under stress because of the warming ocean and the increasing acidity of the ocean. So we can see things happening, but it's not the kind of thing where the public person sticks his head out the window and sees something big happening. So it's a very hard problem, and I don't have a really good answer for how we can move it faster.
Then you would recommend that we work through the youth or through
yeah,
high
well,
schools?
I think that youth and college-educated young people are going to be able to get a broad understanding of this issue and begin to affect the political process. In fact, they did in the 2008 election. Barack Obama would not have won the Iowa primary, which got him off the ground, without a huge support from young people. And then they got out to vote in many states all around the nation. Unfortunately, it did not translate into the kind of understanding and actions needed. So far, it has not translated. There are good things coming out of the Obama administration. But as yet, if you look at what's happening in Congress, it's still the special interests who are defining the policy. And that has to change. So the young people have to not only help elect leaders, but then they have to hold their feet to the fire.
Hi, Dr. Hansen. I'm Kenny Sabbath from St. Agnes Academy in Houston. In Washington, D.C., we find these political and economic forces that deny the very existence of the climate crisis. So do you, Dr. Hansen, think that President Obama or any other president can still achieve some timely and meaningful action against the climate crisis?
Well, the United States has the opportunity and the potential to provide that leadership. We have, however, abdicated that responsibility in the last decade or two. And it is possible that it could be China. It would be to our detriment. China is very serious about this. They are doing more in developing renewable energies than any other country in the world. They're also developing both third generation and fourth generation nuclear power because they know they can't continue to use coal. Their air is so polluted by coal emissions. They've got to solve that problem. And they are really working hard. But we still have the best technological capabilities. If we would get serious about moving toward the technologies that will clean up the atmosphere and reduce these emissions, we could still be the leaders technologically and have products that we can sell to the rest of the world. But it's unclear as to whether the United States will provide that leadership.